In this video, we will learn the philosophy of the German philosopher Hannah Arendt, the existence philosophy or the being of man. First, we will talk about the philosopher. Hannah Arendt was born into a bourgeois family of assimilated Jews in Königsberg, East Prussia, in 1906. Due to anti-Semitism in school, she largely educated herself at home, developing a particular aptitude for classics. She entered Marburg University in 1922 to study theology with Rudolf Bultmann, but was soon drawn to philosophy through the lectures of Martin Heidegger, recently arrived from Freiburg. She embarked on an affair with the married Heidegger, but later in 1926, on his advice, transferred to the University of Heidelberg to work with Karl Jaspers. Under whose supervision, she completed her doctorate in 1929 with a thesis on St. Augustine's concept of love.
Arendt is now primarily known as a creative and original thinker in the area of politics, particularly regarded for her analysis of the nature of totalitarianism and of the circumstances that give rise to political life.
Arendt's 1946 essay, What is Existence Philosophy, was first published in the Partisan Review. Here, she lays out her criticisms of both Husserl's and Heidegger's approaches to phenomenology as overly systematic. She sees Husserl as expressing the predicament of modernity, namely the divorce between the subject and the world of objects, but as attempting to overcome this divorce through his move into the life of consciousness, whereas, whereas she sees Heidegger as intent upon reviving systematic ontology. Arendt sides with her mentor Karl Jaspers, who stresses existential situations which force a kind of reflection that cannot be systematized, but which can be effectively communicated as a kind of experience.
As distinct from existentialism, a French literary movement of the last decade, Existenz philosophy has at least a century-old history. It began with Schelling in his late period, and with Kierkegaard developed in Nietzsche along a great number of as yet unexhausted possibilities, determined the essential part of Perigon's thought and of the so-called life philosophy, until finally in post-war Germany, with Scheller, Heidegger, and Jaspers, enrich a consciousness as yet unsurpassed of what really is at stake in modern philosophy.
The term existence indicates first nothing more than the being of man, independent of all qualities and capacities that can be psychologically investigated. Thus far, what Heidegger once rightly remarked of life philosophy, that the name was about as meaningful as the botany of plants, also holds for existence philosophy. Except that there is no accident that the word being is replaced by the word existence. In this terminological change, one of the fundamental problems of modern philosophy is, in fact, concealed.
Hegel's philosophy, which with a completeness never attained before, had explained and organized into a weirdly coherent whole all natural and historical phenomena. This system, immediately after Hegel's death, appeared to be the last word in the whole of Western philosophy. Insofar as Western philosophy, what came after Hegel was either derivative or it was a rebellion of the philosophers against philosophy in general, rebellion against or doubt of this identity.
This derivative character is peculiar to all the so called schools of modern philosophy. They all seek to establish the unity of thought and being, whether they aim at this harmony in making matter, the materialists, or mind, the idealists, dominant is indifferent. Indifferent also whether by playing with the notion of aspects they seek to establish a whole more Spinozistic in character.
The phenomenological attempt at reconstruction. Husserl sought to reestablish the ancient relation between being and thought, which had guaranteed man a home in this world by a detour through the intentional structure of consciousness. Since every act of consciousness has by its very nature an object, I can at least be certain of one thing, namely that I have the object of my consciousness. Thereby, the question of reality, altogether abstracted from the essence of things, can be bracketed. I have all being as that which I am conscious of, and as consciousness I am, in the manner of man, the being of the world.
In opposition to the arrogant modesty of Husserl, the modern philosophy, which is underevative, seeks along many paths to come to terms with the fact that man is not the creator of the world. Toward this end, it searches further and further in a direction where it shows its best inclinations, to place man in the position where Schelling, in a moment of self misunderstanding, placed God in the position of master of being. Kant's demolition of the old world and Schelling's cry for a new one. Schelling knew exactly what he was rebelling against when over against negative philosophy, against the philosophy of pure thought. He praised a positive philosophy which proceeds from existence, which which it has only as the pure that in which man is driven to philosophize, such as death, guilt, fate, chance, since in all these experiences, reality shows itself as something that cannot be evaded, cannot be resolved by thought. In these situations, man arrives at the consciousness that he is dependent not upon some individual thing and not even upon some general character of limitation, but dependent on the fact that he is.
Thus, essence obviously has nothing more to do with existence. Modern philosophy turns away from the sciences, which investigate the what of things. What this philosophy wishes is this world completely, which has lost precisely only its character as reality.
The unity of thought, the unity of being and thought presuppose the pre-established coincidence of essence and existence. That, namely, everything thinkable also exists, and every existent, because it is knowable, must also be rational. This unity was destroyed by Kant, the true, if also clandestine, founder of the new philosophy, who was likewise remained till the present time its secret king. Already before Kant's revolutionizing of the Western conception of being, Descartes had posed the question of reality in a very modern sense, although he then gave an answer which was completely bound up with the traditional sense. The question whether being in general is just as modern as the answer of the cogito ergo sum is useless, since this answer proves, as Nietzsche remarked, never the existence of the ego cogitans, the thinking ego, but at the most but at most the existence of the cogitare, the act of thought. In other words, the truly living I never arises from the I think, but only an I as object of thought. We know this precisely from the time of Kant.
Kant's destruction of the ancient unity of thought and being. Kant's refutation of the ontological proof of God destroyed that rational belief in God which rested on the notion that what I can rationally conceive must also be, a notion which is not only older than Christianity, but probably also much more strongly rooted in European man since the Renaissance. This so-called atheism of the world, the knowledge, namely that we cannot prove God through reason, touches the ancient philosophical concepts at least as much as the Christian religion. In this atheist world, man can be interpreted in his abandonment or in his individual autonomy.
What Kant had understood when he destroyed the ancient conception of being was that he was at the same time putting in question the reality of everything beyond the individual. That indeed, he implied what Schelling now directly says: there exists nothing universal, but only the individual, and the universal being exists only if it is the absolute individual.
Kant's pre-established harmony between man and the world. Kant's destruction of the ancient concept of being accomplished only the half of the job. He also destroyed the old identity of being and thought, and with it the notion of the pre-established harmony between man and the world. What he did not destroy but implicitly held on to was the concept of equally old and intimately associated of being as the given to whose laws man is in all cases subject. Man could suffer this notion only so long as he had, in the feeling of his security in being and his belonging to the world, at least the certainty that he could know being and the course of the world.
Kant's concept of man's freedom. What holds for Kant's destruction of the ancient notion of being holds in stronger measure for his new concept of man's freedom, a concept in which, oddly enough, the modern lack of freedom is indicated. According to Kant, man has the possibility of determining his own actions out of the freedom of the good will. These actions themselves, however, fall under the causality of nature, as fear essentially alien to man. As soon as human action leaves subjectivity, which is freedom, it enters the objective sphere, which is causality, and loses its character as freedom. Man, free in himself, is hopelessly surrendered to the course of nature alien to him, a fate contrary to him, destructive of his freedom. Herein is expressed the contradictory structure of his human reality, so far as this plays its role in the world. While Kant made man the master and measure of man, at the same time he lowered him to a slave of being. Every new philosopher since Schelling has protested against this devaluation. Modern philosophy is still occupied with this reduction of man, who has just come of age. It is as if man had never before risen so high and fallen so low.
Reinterpretation of man. Instead of positive philosophy, they sought, with the exception of Nietzsche, to reinterpret man in order that he might enter again into this world that robs him of value. His failure was to belong to his being and not merely to be his fate. His failure was to be due not to a nature hostile to him, because it was completely determined by causal law, but was already to be traced in his own nature. Hence, Kant's concepts of human freedom and dignity, as well as the humanity, as the regulative principle of all political action, were abandoned, and there arose that distinctive melancholy which, since Kierkegaard, has been the hallmark of all except the most superficial philosophy.